After selling my company for $50 million, dollars, I threw a party to celebrate my retirement. Right before the toast, I saw my daughter-in-law put something in my wine. When no one was looking, I quietly swapped glasses with her father. What happened to him next shocked me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. My name is Douglas King. I am 72 years old, and for the last 40 years, I have built King Tech from a garage operation into an empire. Tonight was supposed to be my victory lap. My estate in the Hamptons was filled with people who claimed to love me, but I knew better. They were sharks circling a wounded whale, waiting for the blubber to be cut loose. The biggest shark of them all was wearing a red silk dress and standing by the bar. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. I stood on the balcony overlooking the ballroom, gripping the railing until my knuckles turned white. Below me, the champagne flowed, and the orchestra played something soft and expensive, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I had just signed the final papers yesterday. $50 million cash. It was sitting in a trust account that I controlled. But Vanessa did not know about the trust. She only knew about the money. I watched her move through the crowd. She was beautiful. I will give her that. She had the kind of beauty that could cut glass, and she used it like a weapon. My son Brandon trailed behind her like a lost puppy holding her purse. It made me sick to look at him. I raised him to be a man, but somewhere along the line, he decided it was easier to be a servant to a woman who treated him like an accessory. I was about to head down the stairs when I saw it. The moment that changed everything. Vanessa was standing near the head table where my designated toast wine was waiting, a vintage Cabernet I had been saving for 20 years. She thought I was busy shaking hands with the senator. She thought no one was watching. But I have spent my life reading room tones and anticipating market crashes. I saw her look left, then right. Her hand dipped into her clutch. She pulled out a small glass vial no bigger than her thumb. It was clear liquid. Without a moment of hesitation, she uncorked it and tipped the contents into my crystal goblet. She swirled the glass once, set it back down, and smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who just set a trap. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs. My first instinct was to storm down there and grab her by the throat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call the police right then and there. But 40 years of business have taught me one thing. Never strike until you have the leverage to destroy. If I made a scene now, she would claim it was sweetener or medicine. Brandon would take her side. I would look like the crazy old man who had finally lost his mind. No, I needed proof. And I needed to see how far she was willing to go. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tuxedo jacket, and walked down the stairs. I put on the mask I have worn in boardrooms for decades. The mask of the happy, oblivious old man. "Douglas, you look fantastic," a guest said, slapping my back. I smiled and nodded, moving steadily toward the head table. My eyes never left that glass of wine. It sat there like a loaded gun. When I reached the table, Vanessa was there waiting. She kissed my cheek, and the scent of her expensive perfume made me want to gag. "Congratulations, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We are so proud of you. 50 million. Can you believe it?" I looked her dead in the eye. "It is a lot of money, Vanessa. Enough to change lives or ruin them." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered quickly. "Well, you deserve every penny now. Come on, it is time for the toast. Everyone is waiting." She gestured to the glass. My glass. I walked behind the table. I needed a distraction. Just 5 seconds. That was all I needed. Fate, it seemed, was on my side. Standing right next to my spot was Gerald, Vanessa's father. If Vanessa was a shark, Gerald was a leech. He was a man who had never worked a hard day in his life, preferring to gamble away money he did not have. He was currently staying in my guest house because he had lost his apartment in the city. He was already drunk, swaying slightly. His tie loosened. He was eyeing the open bottles on the table with a desperate, thirsty hunger. "Hey, Douglas," Gerald slurred, leaning heavily on the table. "Hell of a party. Hell of a party. You got the good stuff hidden back here. Do not you?" He reached for a bottle of sparkling water, looking disappointed. Vanessa snapped at a waiter passing by. "You there? My father needs a napkin. He spilled sauce on his jacket. Look at this mess." She turned her back to me to berate the poor waiter, pointing at a non-existent stain on Gerald's lapel. Brandon stepped in to calm her down, blocking the view of the guests. This was it. In one smooth motion, I reached out. I took my poison goblet and slid it to the right and right in front of Gerald. Then I took Gerald's empty, identical glass and slid it in front of me. I grabbed a bottle of safe, unopened Merlot from the service tray behind me and poured a fresh serving into my new glass. It took 3 seconds. When Vanessa turned back around, I was standing there calm and composed, holding my glass. Gerald was holding his. Vanessa looked at me. She looked at the glass in my hand. She did not notice the switch. She was too arrogant. She thought she was the smartest person in the room. "All right, everyone," I boomed, my voice echoing through the ballroom. "If I could have your attention." The music stopped. The chatter died down. 200 faces turned toward me. I saw the senator. I saw my lawyers. I saw my competitors. And right in the front row, I saw Brandon and Vanessa. Brandon looked nervous. Vanessa looked eager. She was practically vibrating with anticipation. She was waiting for the show. I raised my glass. "To family." I said, my eyes locked on hers. "To family." The crowd echoed. I brought the glass to my lips. Over the rim. I watched her. Her eyes widened. She was holding her breath. She expected me to drop. She expected me to convulse. I took a long, slow sip. The wine was good, bold, oi, and completely poison-free. I swallowed. I lowered the glass. I smiled at her. The confusion on her face was worth every penny I had ever made. She blinked rapidly, trying to process why I was still standing, why I was not clawing at my throat. Then I heard it. Next to me, Gerald let out a sound that was half cough, half gasp. I turned. Gerald had drained the goblet. He was a greedy man, and he had gulped down the expensive vintage like it was cheap beer. He dropped the glass. It shattered on the marble floor, sending shards of crystal flying. Gerald grabbed his throat. His face, which was flushed from alcohol, suddenly turned a terrifying shade of gray. His eyes bulged out of his sockets. Dad Vanessa screamed. She did not scream because she was worried. She screamed because she knew exactly what was happening. Gerald fell to his knees. He was clawing at his chest, tearing at his shirt. Foam white and frothy began to bubble at the corners of his mouth. His body went rigid, then began to jerk violently. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests screamed and backed away. Brandon froze, his mouth hanging open uselessly. "Call 911, I shouted, pointing at my head of security. I knelt down next to Gerald, not to help him, but to witness the consequences of his daughter's greed. He was convulsing on the floor, his heels drumming a frantic rhythm against the cold stone. He looked at me with terrified, pleading eyes. He could not breathe. His airway was closing up. Vanessa threw herself onto the floor next to him, but she did not start CPR. She did not check his pulse. She reached for the broken stem of the glass on the floor. She was trying to hide the evidence. I saw her hand close around the jagged crystal base, the one that still had a few drops of the poison wine in it. She was going to pocket it or throw it away. I grabbed her wrist. Her head snapped up. Her eyes were wild, full of panic and hate. "Let go of me," she hissed. My father is dying. Leave the glass. Vanessa, I said, my voice low and dangerous so only she could hear. You old bastard. Let go. She tried to wrench her hand away, scratching my arm with her manicured nails. But I did not build a business empire by being weak physically or mentally. I squeezed harder until she gasped and dropped the glass shard. Sullivan. I barked without looking away from her. My lawyer Sullivan appeared out of the crowd instantly. He was a man who slept in a suit and knew where all the bodies were buried. Secure this, Freshim, I said, Bishihash, pointing to the broken glass. And get the rest of the wine from that bottle she poured from. No one touches it. Sullivan did not ask questions. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and picked up the glass shard, wrapping it carefully. Vanessa watched him do it, and I saw the color drain from her face. She knew. She knew that. I knew. The paramedics burst through the double doors. They pushed past the stunned guests and surrounded Gerald. He is going into cardiac arrest, one of them shouted. Clear. They ripped open Gerald's shirt. They began chest compressions. The sound of ribs cracking echoed in the silent room. Vanessa stood up, trembling. She turned to Brandon, who finally snapped out of his trance and ran to her side. It is okay, baby, Brandon stammered, hugging her. He is going to be okay. It is just a heart attack. He drinks too much. We knew this could happen. Vanessa buried her face in Brandon's chest, but she was not crying. I could see her eyes over his shoulder. They were dry, they were cold, and they were fixed on me. She was not sad that her father was dying. She was terrified because her plan had failed. And worse, she was furious that I was the one still standing. They loaded Gerald onto the stretcher. He was unconscious now, an oxygen mask strapped to his face. I am going with him, Vanessa announced. Brandon, bring the car. She started to follow the stretcher, but she stopped as she passed me. She leaned in close. This is not over, she whispered. You think you are clever, Douglas, but you are just a lucky old man. You should have drunk that wine. I looked at her and brushed a speck of dust off my lapel. And you should have remembered who pays for the roof over your head. Vanessa, get out of my sight. She stormed out, following the paramedics. The sirens wailed outside, fading into the distance. The party was over. The guests were whispering, glancing at me with a mix of pity and suspicion. They thought they had just witnessed a tragedy. They did not know they had just witnessed an attempted murder. I turned to Sullivan, who was standing quietly by my side, holding the evidence. Get the car, Sullivan, I said. We are going to the hospital, Sullivan asked. Yes, I replied, but not to visit. I want that glass tested immediately. I want a full toxicology report. And Sullivan canceled Brandon's credit cards. All of them. Sullivan raised an eyebrow, but a small smile played on his lips. Consider it done, sir. I looked down at the spot where Gerald had collapsed. There was a stain of red wine on the white marble. It looked like blood. I had survived the first strike, but I knew this was just the opening move. Vanessa was desperate now, and a desperate enemy is the most dangerous kind. She would not stop. She would try to turn this around. She would try to make me the villain. Let her try. I walked out of the ballroom, leaving the whispers and the shattered glass behind me. I was Douglas King. I had fought unions' lawsuits and hostile takeovers. I was not about to let a greedy little gold digger take me down in my own house. The war had just begun. The waiting room at Mount Sinai Hospital smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee. It is a smell I have hated since my wife died here 10 years ago. I sat in the corner on a hard plastic chair, watching the clock on the wall tick away seconds of my life. Brandon was pacing back and forth, his shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. Vanessa was huddled on a sofa near the vending machines, her face buried in her hands. She was putting on a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Every few minutes, she would let out a loud sob, shaking her shoulders just enough to draw the attention of the passing nurses. They looked at her with sympathy. Then they looked at me, at the stone-faced old man in the tuxedo, with suspicion. They did not know that her tears were as fake as the diamond on her finger, which I paid for. A doctor in blue scrubs pushed through the double doors. He looked exhausted. He pulled off his mask and looked around the room. Family of Gerald Vance. Vanessa shot up from the sofa like a spring. She ran to the doctor, grabbing his arm with desperate hands. "Is he okay? Please tell me he's okay, doctor." The doctor sighed and shook his head slowly. I stood up and walked over, keeping my distance. I needed to hear this. "He is in critical condition," the doctor said, his voice grave. "We have managed to stabilize his heart rate, but he is in a deep coma. His kidneys are shutting down, and there is severe swelling in his brain. We are doing everything we can, but I have to be honest with you. It does not look good." Vanessa let out a scream that echoed down the hallway. She collapsed into Brandon's arms, her legs giving out beneath her. Brandon held her tight, stroking her hair, looking at the doctor with wide, terrified eyes. "What happened?" Brandon asked. "He was fine an hour ago. He was laughing. He was drinking." "That is the concerning part," the doctor said, looking down at his clipboard. "We ran a toxicology screen. We found traces of a highly concentrated neurotoxin in his system. It is not something you find in alcohol. It interacts violently with heart medication. If he had arrived 10 minutes later, he would be dead." Vanessa pulled away from Brandon. She turned slowly to face me. Her eyes were red and puffy, but behind the tears, I saw the cold calculation of a viper about to strike. She knew the poison was real. She knew I knew, and now she had to control the narrative before I could speak. "It was him," she whispered, pointing a shaking finger at me. Brandon looked confused. "What? What are you talking about? Vanessa!" "It was your father!" she screamed, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "He did this! I saw him!" The waiting room went silent. A police officer who had been taking a statement from a nurse nearby stopped writing and looked over. "Vanessa, do not be ridiculous," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Do not lie to me, you monster," she shrieked, advancing on me. "I saw you at the party. You were jealous because my father was getting along with everyone. You have always hated him. You have always looked down on us because we are poor. You think we are trash." She turned to the doctor, grabbing his scrubs again. "Doctor, my father has a heart condition. He knows he cannot drink red wine. He never drinks it. But Douglas forced him. I saw them by the bar. Douglas kept refilling his glass, pressuring him, saying it would be rude not to toast. He bullied him into drinking that poison." I looked at Brandon, expecting him to defend me. I expected him to tell his wife that she was crazy, that his father was a respected businessman, not a murderer. I expected him to remember the man who taught him how to ride a bike, who paid for his Ivy League education, who sat by his bedside when he had pneumonia. But when I looked at my son, I did not see a man. I saw a coward. Brandon looked at Vanessa, then he looked at me. I saw the gears turning in his head. He was afraid of her. He was afraid of losing her approval. And deep down, he was weak, Dad, Brandon said, his voice cracking. "Is it true? Did you make him drink it?" I felt like I had been punched in the gut, not by an enemy, but by my own blood. "Brandon," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "think about what you are asking. Do you really believe I would poison a man at my own retirement party? Do you think I am that stupid? You have been acting strange lately." "Dad," Brandon said, stepping back from me as if I were contagious. "You have been forgetting things. You have been angry, and you always said Gerald was a leech. You said he was a bad influence." I stared at him in disbelief. This was her doing, For years, she had been dripping poison into his ear, telling him I was controlling, telling him I was senile, and now she was cashing in on all that manipulation. He is a sick old man, Vanessa sobbed, turning to the police officer who was now approaching us. Officer, arrest him! He tried to kill my father. He is a danger to everyone. The officer stepped between us, his hand resting instinctively on his belt. Sir, I am going to need you to step back. I looked at the officer, then at the doctor who was looking at me with undisguised disgust. The narrative had shifted. In the blink of an eye, I had gone from the victim of an attempted murder to the perpetrator of a hate crime against a poor sick man. I looked at Brandon one last time. He was holding Vanessa, whispering, creating a wall of unity against me. He had chosen his side. He had chosen the lie because it was easier than facing the truth. I felt a cold hardness settle in my chest. The last ember of affection I held for my son flickered and died. I am not saying another word without my lawyer, I said to the officer. You do not have to say anything. Vanessa spat at me. The truth is in that hospital room. My father is fighting for his life because of you. If he dies, his blood is on your hands. I looked at her and for a brief second, I let the mask slip. I let her see the rage burning underneath. If he dies, Vanessa, I said softly, so only she and Brandon could hear. Then you better hope your acting skills can save you from an autopsy. She flinched, just a little, but it was enough. The officer grabbed my arm. Sir, that sounds like a threat. Come with me. We need to have a talk outside. As I was led away, I looked back. Vanessa buried her face in Brandon's shoulder again, pretending to weep. But over his shoulder, she watched me leave. Her eyes were dry. She had won the battle. She had turned my son against me and got me kicked out of the hospital. But she had made a fatal mistake. She thought she had isolated me. She thought that by taking away my family, she made me weak. She did not understand that she had just removed my only weakness. I no longer had to worry about protecting Brandon's feelings. I no longer had to worry about keeping the peace of song. I walked through the sliding doors into the cool night air. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hand was not shaking. Sullivan. I said when my lawyer answered on the first ring. I am at the hospital. Sullivan said, I am parking the car. Change of plans. I said, meet me at the precinct. And Sullivan, bring the private investigator you told me about, the one who specializes in background checks. I want to know everything about Gerald and Vanessa. I want to know what they ate for breakfast in third grade. I want to know who they owe money to. Understood, Sullivan said. And one more thing I added, looking back at the hospital lights. Freeze Brandon's trust fund. Not just the credit cards. Everything. The mortgage. The car payments. The country club membership. Cut it all off. Douglas, are you sure? Sullivan asked, his voice hesitant. That is the nuclear option. He is your son. I closed my eyes and saw Brandon standing there, looking at me with fear and accusation. I do not have a son. I said, I have a liability and I am liquidating it. I hung up the phone. The war was no longer cold. It was scorching hot, and I was ready to burn everything to the ground to find the truth. The interrogation room they found for us was actually just a quiet corner of the hospital cafeteria, which had been closed for the night. The smell of bleach was stronger here, mixed with the faint scent of old fryer grease. Officer Miller sat across from me holding a notepad. He was young, probably no older than 30, and he had the tired look of a man who just wanted his shift to end without a homicide. Mr. King, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened at the bar, Officer Miller said, his pen poised over the paper. I took a deep breath. I sat up straight, adjusting my tuxedo jacket, which suddenly felt like a straight jacket. I already told you. Officer, we were preparing for the toast. Gerald was drunk. He is an alcoholic. Everyone knows this. He poured himself a drink and he drank it too fast. His body rejected it. That is all. Officer Miller looked at me skeptically. He tapped his pen against the table. Your daughter-in-law claims you handed him the glass. She claims you insisted he drink it. She says she heard you whisper something to him right before he collapsed. Something about a debt. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. A debt. Officer, I just sold my company for $50 million. Gerald owes me money. Yes, everyone owes me money. But why would I kill him over a few thousand in unpaid loans? That does not make business sense. The officer seemed to consider this. He looked like he was about to agree with me. Logic was on my side. Motive was thin. But then the door opened. Vanessa walked in. She was no longer crying. She had composed herself into the picture of a terrified, concerned daughter. She was holding her phone. Officer, she said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. I found it. I knew I had it saved. She walked over to the table and placed the phone down in front of Officer Miller. My father has been terrified of Douglas for months, Vanessa said, looking at me with wide, fearful eyes. He told me Douglas was threatening him. I did not want to believe it. But then I recorded this last week. I leaned forward to look at the screen. My stomach dropped. The video was from Thanksgiving. We were in my study. In the video, I was standing over Gerald shouting. My face was red. I was pointing a finger at his chest. Gerald was cowering in a chair, looking pathetic and scared. In the video, my voice was loud and angry. You are a parasite, Gerald. If you do not disappear, I will make you disappear. Do you understand me? I will end you. The video cut to black. I sat back in my chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. Context is a funny thing. In reality, that argument happened because I had caught Gerald stealing my late wife's jewelry to sell at a pawn shop. I was telling him to get out of my house and out of my life. I was threatening to cut him off financially, not to kill him. But on that small screen in that sterile hospital cafeteria, I just looked like a violent, unhinged bully threatening a frail old man. Officer Miller looked up from the phone. The sympathy was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by cold professional suspicion. Mr. King, do you deny that is you in the video? I looked at Vanessa. She was biting her lip, pretending to be brave, but in her eyes I saw a glimmer of triumph. She had been saving that video. She had been waiting for the perfect moment to use it. No, I said quietly. That is me, but you are missing the context. I do not think context changes a death threat. Mr. King, Officer Miller said, standing up. He clipped his pen onto his notebook. Based on the witness testimony from the victim's daughter in this video evidence showing a history of hostility and threats of violence, I am issuing an emergency protective order. What I asked standing up, you cannot be serious. Sit down, sir. The officer barked, his hand resting on his taser. I sat down slowly, my hands clenched into fists under the table. This order is temporary, pending a formal hearing. Officer Miller continued reciting the legal jargon that was tightening the noose around my neck, but effective immediately. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Gerald Vance and his immediate family. That includes his daughter Vanessa and anyone currently in her company. I looked at Brandon, who was standing in the doorway behind Vanessa. He looked at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. Does that include my son? I asked. If he is with his wife, then yes. The officer said, you are to leave this hospital immediately. If you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do you understand? I understood perfectly. It was a master stroke. Vanessa had not just accused me, she had legally severed me from the situation. She had ensured that while Gerald lay in a coma, unable to speak, she was the only voice the doctors and the police would hear. She could spin any story she wanted. She could tamper with any evidence she wanted, and I was legally prohibited from stopping her. I looked at Vanessa one last time. "You are playing a dangerous game," I said, my voice low and steady. "And you are losing it," she replied. "Now get out before I ask the officer to put you in handcuffs." I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I refused to look like a defeated man. I nodded to the officer. "I will comply," I said, "but mark my words. Officer, when the truth comes out, make sure you write down that you were the one who helped her get away with it." I walked out of the cafeteria. I walked down the long white hallway, past the nurse's station where people whispered as I passed. I walked past the room where Gerald lay dying, the only witness who could clear my name. I reached the automatic sliding doors of the emergency entrance. They whooshed open and the cold night air hit me. It was raining now, a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked into my tuxedo within seconds. I stood on the curb alone. Behind me, inside the warmth of the hospital, my family was plotting my destruction. My son was holding the hand of the woman who tried to frame me. My reputation was being dismantled piece by piece. I watched through the glass doors as Brandon put his arm around Vanessa. She leaned into him, looking fragile and dependent. It was a perfect picture of a grieving couple. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was wet with rain. I dialed Sullivan. "Did you get the investigator?" I asked. "He is on his way," Sullivan answered. "Where are you?" "I am on the curb," I said, watching the hospital security guard who was now standing by the door, making sure I did not try to re-enter. "I have been kicked out. Restraining order." There was a silence on the line. Then Sullivan spoke, his voice low. "That means they are scared. Douglas, they are trying to hawken you out because they know you are close to seeing something you shouldn't." I turned my back on the hospital. I looked out at the dark, wet parking lot. "I am not just close. Sullivan, I am going to tear their lives apart. I want you to find out everything about Gerald's medical history. I want to know every doctor he has seen in the last 10 years. And Sullivan, get the car around. I am done playing defense." I hung up. The rain dripped from my nose, but I did not wipe it away. Let it rain. It would wash away the shock. It would wash away the hesitation. I was 72 years old. I had started with nothing in a garage in Detroit. I had fought unions. I had fought the IRS. I had fought competitors who tried to burn my factories down. Vanessa thought a piece of paper from a rookie cop could stop me. She was about to find out that the most dangerous thing in the world is a man who has lost everything and has nothing left to lose but his anger. I saw the headlights of my town car cutting through the rain. Let's go to war. The leather seats of my town car were cold, but not as cold as the rage settling in my chest. I watched the hospital disappear in the rearview mirror through the rain-streaked window. They had thrown me out. They had treated me like a criminal in the very building I had donated millions to build. Vanessa thought she had won. She thought a piece of paper and a fake tear could destroy me. She forgot one simple rule of nature. You do not bite the hand that feeds you unless you are ready to starve. I pulled my phone from my pocket. It was time to remind them who actually owned the world they lived in. "Sullivan," I said the moment he answered. "Execute the freeze." "Douglas." "Are you sure?" Sullivan asked, his voice tight with worry. "This is extreme. Brandon has never paid a bill in his life. If we cut him off now in the middle of a medical emergency, it could look bad in court. I do not care how it looks." "Sullivan," I snapped, "I care about the truth. And the truth is, my son and his wife just accused me of attempted murder. They want to play grown-up games. They can pay grown-up prices." I took a deep breath, watching the city lights blur past. "I want everything gone. Sullivan, the black MX, the emergency visa, the joint checking account. Cancel the lease on the Range Rover. Call the country club and suspend their membership effective immediately. If Brandon tries to buy a pack of gum, I want the machine to laugh at him. I heard the typing of a keyboard on the other end of the line. It was the sound of a guillotine blade being hoisted up. "It is done," Sullivan said softly. "The accounts are locked. The cards are flagged as stolen." "Good," I said. "Now let us see how long their love lasts when the money runs out." I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. I could see the scene unfolding at the hospital as clearly as if I were standing there at the intake desk of Mount Si. The billing coordinator was looking at Brandon. Let us call her Mrs. Higgins. She was a no-nonsense woman who had seen it all. "Mr. King," Mrs. Higgins said, looking over her glasses, "we need to process the payment for your father-in-law's admission. Since you requested the VIP suite in the private nephrology team, we require a pre-authorization of $50,000. Beside Brandon, Vanessa was pacing back and forth, still pretending to be the distraught daughter. But she stopped when she heard the number. "Just pay it. Brandon," she snapped. "My father needs the best. Do not be cheap." Brandon puffed out his chest. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the Centurion card, the heavy black titanium card that I had given him for his 25th birthday. It was a symbol of unlimited power, a symbol that he was a king. "Of course," Brandon said with that arrogant little smirk he adopted whenever he spent my money. "Put it all on this." He handed the card to Mrs. Higgins. She swiped it. There is a sound a credit card machine makes when it declines. It is a harsh judgment, a mechanical rejection. "Beep." Mrs. Higgins frowned. She looked at the screen. She swiped it again. "Beep." Brandon's smirk faltered. "What is the problem?" he asked. "It says declined, sir." Mrs. Higgins said loud enough for the people in the line behind him to hear. "That is impossible." Brandon laughed nervously. "There is no limit on that card. Try it again. Or here, try the Visa." He pulled out the gold Visa card. His hands were starting to shake now. He could feel the eyes of the strangers on his back. He could feel Vanessa's glare burning into the side of his head. Mrs. Higgins swiped the Visa. "Beep." Card reported lost or stolen. Brandon's face went pale. "Stolen. No, that is my card. My father pays the bill." Mrs. Higgins handed the card back to him with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "Well, sir, the bank says otherwise. Do you have another form of payment? Perhaps a debit card?" Brandon fumbled through his wallet. He pulled out a debit card linked to the joint account I filled every month with $10,000 for their living expenses. He inserted the chip. He typed the PIN. Declined. Insufficient funds. The line behind him was getting restless. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered. "Hurry up!" Vanessa stepped in, snatching the wallet from his hands. "You are useless. Brandon, let me do it." She pulled out her own card, the platinum supplementary card attached to my account. She threw it on the counter like a queen throwing a coin to a beggar. "Run this one," she commanded. "Mrs." Higgins didn't even blink. She swiped it. Beep. Vanessa froze. She looked at the machine, then at Brandon, then at the clerk. "Call the bank." She hissed at Brandon. "Call your father. This is a mistake. I cannot call him." Brandon whispered, his voice trembling with panic. "We just got a restraining order against him. Vanessa, if I call him, I go to jail." And that was the moment. That was the moment the reality of what they had done crashed down on them. They had built a fortress to keep me out, but they forgot that I was the one paying for the bricks. "Sir," Mrs. Higgins said, her voice icy now, "if you cannot provide a valid form of payment, we cannot move the patient to the VIP suite. We will have to transfer him to the general ward, and I will need you to step aside so I can help the next paying customer." Brandon stood there holding a handful of useless plastic. He looked small. He looked pathetic. For the first time in his life, he was facing the world without my shield. Vanessa turned on him. Her mask of grief slipped completely, revealing the ugly greed underneath. "Fix this, Brandon," she shrieked, not caring who heard. "Fix this now, or so help me, God." I opened my eyes in the back of the town car. A small, cold smile touched my lips. "Welcome to the real world, son," I whispered to the rain. "I hope you enjoyed your stay at the Hotel King because checkout time was 5 minutes ago." "Now, Sullivan," I said into the phone, "take me to the office. I have a forensic accountant to meet. If they want to fight about money, let us find out exactly where all of theirs has been going." My office at King Tech was supposed to be my sanctuary. It was a fortress of glass and steel on the 45th floor where I had built my empire. But as I sat there staring at the rain-lashed city below, I realized that even this fortress was not safe. Sullivan was sitting across from me, organizing files. But the silence was heavy. It was the calm before the storm. And then the storm broke. My phone rang. It was not a normal ring. It was the specific ringtone I had assigned to Brandon years ago. It used to make me smile. Now it sounded like an air raid siren warning of an incoming attack. I pressed the speakerphone button. I wanted Sullivan to hear this. I wanted a witness to the madness. "Dad, are you insane?" Brandon's voice filled the room. He was screaming so loud the audio distorted. I could hear the background noise of traffic and sirens. He was panicking. "You cut us off!" Brandon shouted, his voice cracking with disbelief. "You cut everything off. The cards, the accounts, even the gas card for the car. We are stuck at a gas station in the rain." "Dad, do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" The attendant looked at me like I was a criminal. I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my hands over my chest. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. "You are a criminal, Brandon," I said calmly. "Or at least you are sleeping with one. You accused me of murder 3 hours ago. Did you think I would keep paying for your lifestyle while you tried to put me in prison?" There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing heavily. I could almost see him standing there in the rain, soaking wet, holding the nozzle of a gas pump he could not pay for. "It is not about the money," Brandon stammered, trying to pivot. "It is about respect. You are treating us like children. Vanessa is upset. She is grieving. Her father is in a coma and you are worried about your bank account. You are a heartless old man." I closed my eyes. It was always the same script. I was the villain because I had boundaries. They were the victims because they had consequences. "Put your wife on the phone, Brandon." I said. "No, she is too upset to talk to you," Brandon said, defensiveness creeping into his tone. "Put her on." I commanded my voice, striking the desk like a gavel. "Or I call the dealership and report that Range Rover is stolen right now. You have 30 seconds before the police pull you over." There was a fumbling sound, a muffled argument. Then the line went quiet for a second before a new voice cut through the static. It was Vanessa. She was not screaming like Brandon. She was not crying like she had been at the hospital. Her voice was ice cold. It was the voice of the woman who had poured poison into my glass without shaking. "You think you are winning, Douglas," she said. "You think because you pulled the plug on the money that we are going to come crawling back. You think we will apologize? I think you are going to realize you bit off more than you can chew." "Vanessa," I replied, "you are penniless. You are homeless because I am changing the locks on the guest house tonight, and you are under investigation." Vanessa laughed. It was a low, throaty sound that made the hair on my arm stand up. "You really do not get it, do you? You think money is power? But you are wrong. Information is power. And right now I hold all the cards." "What are you talking about?" I asked, signaling Sullivan to start recording the call. "I am talking about my father." She said, "Gerald, you know the man you poisoned. I did not poison him. Vanessa, we both know that. It does not matter what we know, she interrupted sharply. It matters what the court thinks. And guess what? Douglas, before my father went into that coma, he signed a very interesting document, a durable power of attorney. I froze. Sullivan looked up from his files, his eyes wide. That is right, Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with venom. I am his legal guardian. I make his medical decisions. I control his legal affairs. And as his legal representative, I am preparing to file a civil lawsuit against you for elder abuse, attempted murder, and emotional distress. I gripped the edge of my desk. A civil suit? The burden of proof was lower than a criminal case, and the publicity would be catastrophic. You have no proof, Bun, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I do not need proof to destroy your reputation. She hissed. Imagine the headlines. Douglas, the billionaire tycoon who poisoned his poor sick-in-law because he was a burden. Imagine the protests outside your house. Imagine the shareholders of the company you just sold panicking and suing you for breach of morality clauses. I will tie up your $50 million in court for the next 10 years. You will die before you see a penny of it. I stayed silent. She had done her homework. She knew exactly where to hit me. She was threatening my legacy. So, here is the deal, Vanessa said, her tone shifting to business like precision. You are going to reactivate the accounts. You are going to transfer $5 million into an offshore account for my pain and suffering. And you are going to sign over the deed to the Hamptons house. And if I refuse, I asked, then I pull the plug on my father. She said. The room went deadly silent. What did you say? I whispered. You heard me, she said. As his medical proxy, I can decide when to stop life support. If he dies, Douglas, it becomes a murder investigation. And with the restraining order and the video I have of you threatening him, you will be charged. I will sacrifice him to take you down. Do not test me. She hung up. The dial tone hummed in the empty office. I sat there staring at the phone. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from pure, unadulterated shock. She had just threatened to kill her own father to frame me for murder. She was not just a gold digger. She was a psychopath. Sullivan stood up slowly. He looked pale. Did you get that? He asked. I nodded. That was blackmail, Douglas Sullivan said, pacing the room. But it is also a legitimate threat. She has the power of attorney. If she takes Gerald off life support before he wakes up and clears your name, you are in serious trouble. The optics alone will bury you. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was hammering against the glass. I looked down at the city lights, thinking about the woman who had just declared war on my soul. She thinks she has checkmated me, I said quietly. She thinks because she is willing to let him die, she has the upper hand. Douglas. We need to settle, Sullivan said. We cannot risk a murder charge. Give her the money. I turned around. I looked at Sullivan, the man who had been by my side for 30 years. No, I said, Douglas, be reasonable. I am done being reasonable. I snapped. She wants a war. She wants to use the legal system as a weapon. Fine, but she forgot one thing. She is not the only one who can dig up dirt. I walked back to my desk and picked up the file the private investigator had just dropped off before the call. It was thin, just a few pages, but it was a start. Sullivan, I said, opening the file. You said the investigator is running a background check on Gerald. Tell him to dig deeper. I want to know about every hospital he has been in. I want to know about every insurance claim he has ever filed. What are you looking for? Sullivan asked. I looked at the first page of the file. It was a credit report. Gerald had no credit history before 5 years ago. It was like he didn't exist. I am looking for a ghost. I said, Vanessa said she would pull the plug on her father, but a daughter does not kill her father for money. Unless what Sullivan asked, unless he is not really her father. I finished. It was a hunch, a wild, crazy hunch, but it was all I had. Get the car, Sullivan, I said, grabbing my coat. We are going back to the hospital. But the restraining order, Sullivan protested. You will be arrested. I am not going to see Gerald, I said, heading for the door. I am going to see the only person Vanessa can't control, the night shift janitor, the one who empties the trash in the VIP wing. Why? Sullivan asked, running to catch up. Because Vanessa is arrogant, I said, pressing the elevator button. She thinks she cleaned up the crime scene. But arrogant people always leave something behind. And I am going to find it even if I have to dig through the garbage myself. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. The blackmail call had been meant to break me. Instead, it had given me the one thing I needed, a deadline. I had until Gerald's life support was turned off to find the truth. The clock was ticking and I was done playing by the rules. The rain against the office window sounded like bullets. It was fitting because I felt like I was standing in a firing line waiting for the final shot. Sullivan sat across from me. He had not said a word since we returned from the hospital. On the mahogany desk between us sat a single manila envelope. It looked innocent enough. It was just paper. But I knew that what was inside that envelope would either save my life or confirm that my family was truly made of monsters. Sullivan reached out and tapped the envelope with his index finger. His face was gray. I have known Sullivan for 30 years. I have seen him handle bankruptcy hearings, hostile takeovers, and federal investigations without blinking. But tonight he looked terrified. Douglas, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You need to prepare yourself. What we found in that glass, it is not what we thought. I stared at the envelope. Open it. Sullivan. He slid the papers out. They were covered in medical jargon, chemical formulas, and red stamps that said confidential. We sent the sample to a private lab in the city, Sullivan explained, one that specializes in industrial espionage and chemical warfare. They ran a full spectrum analysis and I asked, leaning forward, was it arsenic, cyanide, rat poison? Sullivan shook his head slowly. No. Douglas, those things kill you. They stop your heart or shut down your lungs. If Vanessa wanted you dead, she would have used something simple. But she did not want you dead. I frowned. I did not understand. Gerald was in a coma. He was dying. Gerald is dying because he drank the whole glass in one gulp. Sullivan said he took a massive overdose, but the substance in that wine was not designed to kill. It is a synthetic compound, a mixture of scopolamine and a high-grade paralytic agent. In street terms, they call it the devil's breath. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I had heard of this. It was a drug used by cartels in South America. Sullivan continued reading from the report, his voice steady but grim. At the correct dosage, which is what she prepared for you, this drug does not kill. It suppresses the free will center of the brain. It causes short-term memory loss and total compliance. The victim remains awake. They can walk. They can talk. They can hold a pen. But they have no will of their own. They will do anything they are told. I sat back in my chair, feeling the blood drain from my face. Anything. I whispered. Anything. Sullivan confirmed. If you had drunk that wine, Douglas, you would not have fallen to the floor like Gerald. You would have stood there smiling. You would have felt a little dizzy. Maybe. And then Vanessa could have walked you into your study, put a pen in your hand, and told you to sign over everything. The horror of it washed over me. It was worse than murder. Murder is final. Murder is quick. This was slavery. She wanted to turn me into a zombie. I said, realizing the full scope of her cruelty. She wanted to strip my mind, leaving only a shell that could obey orders. Sullivan nodded. Think about the timing. Douglas, why do this at the party? Why in front of witnesses? Because she needed you to be seen alive. She needed the guests to see you smiling and drinking. Then she would have taken you upstairs claiming you were tired. She would have had you sign the transfer deeds, the power of attorney, the updated will, and the next morning when you woke up with no memory of the night before, she would own everything. And if I fought it later, I asked. You could not fight it, Sullivan said, because to the outside world you were awake. You signed the papers willingly. There would be no evidence of force. And by the time the drug wore off, your assets would be in the Caymans, and she would be your legal guardian claiming you were senile. I stood up and walked to the window looking down at the city. My reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. I imagined myself in that state, sitting at my desk, drooling slightly while Vanessa whispered commands in my ear. I imagined Brandon standing there watching his father being reduced to a puppet and doing nothing to stop it. They did not want my money, I said quietly. They wanted my soul. They wanted to humiliate me. They wanted to make me hand them the keys to the kingdom while I thanked them for it. It explains why Gerald is in such bad shape, Sullivan added. His body is fighting the paralytic. His heart stopped because the dosage was meant for a 200-pound man to sip slowly over an hour. Gerald took it all in 3 seconds. His system went into shock. So she nearly killed her own father by accident, I said, turning back to the room. And now she is using his condition to frame you. Sullivan finished. It is evil. Douglas. Pure, calculated evil. I looked at the report again. The chemical formula looked like a map of hell, but this is good news. Sullivan, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Sullivan looked at me like I was crazy. Good news. Douglas. She tried to lobotomize you. Yes, I said, picking up the report, but this proves intent. This proves premeditation. And most importantly, this proves that she is not just a grieving daughter. She is a chemist. A normal person does not have access to synthetic scopolamine. You do not buy this at the pharmacy. I looked at Sullivan. Find out where she got it. We are already on it. Sullivan said the lab identified a specific impurity in the mixture. It is a signature from a specific type of underground manufacturer. We are tracing the supply chain now. I nodded. My mind was racing. I was no longer the victim. I was the hunter. She thinks I am cornered. I said she thinks I am running scared from her restraining order. She thinks I am worried about the bad press. I walked over to the safe in the corner of my office. I spun the dial. Click, click, click. I opened the heavy steel door. Inside were not stacks of cash or gold bars. There were files. Files I had kept on everyone I ever did business with. Everyone who ever tried to cross me. And there was a new file. A red one. I had started it the day Brandon brought Vanessa home. I pulled it out. Sullivan, I said, placing the red file on the desk next to the toxicology report. You asked me once why I never fully trusted her, why I insisted on the prenuptial agreement, even though Brandon cried about it. Sullivan nodded. I never told you this, I said, opening the file. But 5 years ago, when they met, Vanessa was not a model. She was working at a high-end club in Miami, a club known for drugging wealthy patrons and emptying their credit cards. Sullivan's eyes went wide. I buried it. I said, for Brandon. I thought she had changed. I thought if I gave her a life of luxury, she would not need to steal anymore. I thought money would cure her greed. I looked down at the toxic report. I was wrong. You cannot cure a predator. You can only cage them. I closed the file. The sound was loud in the quiet office. "We have the weapon," I said, tapping the toxicology report. "Now we need the trap." "What do you have in mind?" Sullivan asked. "She wants me to be senile," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "She wants me to be weak. She wants to believe that her plan is still working, even though Gerald drank the wine." I looked at Sullivan. "I am going to give her exactly what she wants. I am going to call Brandon tomorrow. I am going to sound confused. I am going to apologize. I am going to tell them that I am forgetting things, that I am scared." Sullivan frowned. "You are going to fake dementia. I am going to invite the wolf into the henhouse," I said. "And when she steps inside thinking she is about to feast, I am going to be waiting behind the door with this report in one hand and a pair of handcuffs in the other. But first, I need to make sure she feels safe. Unlock the accounts." "Sullivan," Sullivan gasped. "Douglas, are you sure?" "Unlock them," I commanded. "Reactivate the credit cards. Transfer $10,000 into their joint account. Send a flower arrangement to the hospital with a note apologizing for the misunderstanding." Sullivan typed on his laptop, shaking his head in disbelief. "You are baiting the hook," he said. "I am not just baiting it," I said, staring at the rain. "I am covering it in gold." "She is greedy, Sullivan, and greed makes people blind. When she sees that money hit the account, she will not think it is a trap. She will think she won. She will think her blackmail worked, and that arrogance will be her downfall." I walked back to the window. The city lights below looked like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "Enjoy the money, Vanessa," I whispered to the reflection in the glass. "Buy yourself something nice because it is the last thing you will ever buy as a free woman." The game had changed. It was no longer about defense. It was about total annihilation, and I was ready to play my part. The confused old man, the helpless victim. I would give the performance of a lifetime. And the curtain call would be her reading her rights in the back of a police car. The toxicology report sat on my desk like a loaded gun. It was the only weapon I needed to send Vanessa to prison for 20 years. But as I looked at the chemical breakdown of the devil's breath, I realized that prison was too good for her. If I went to the police now, they would arrest her. Brandon would play the victim. He would claim he knew nothing about it. He would cry to the press that he was deceived by a wicked woman, and he would inherit my empire when I died. No, that was not justice. Justice is not just punishing the sinner. It is exposing the sin. I needed Brandon to incriminate himself. I needed him to look me in the eye and choose greed over his own father. I needed to know if my son was just a fool or if he was a monster like his wife. I looked at Sullivan. "Do not call the police yet," I said, sliding the report into my desk drawer. Sullivan looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Douglas, this is attempted murder. We have the evidence. Why are we waiting?" "Because I want to catch them in the act," I said, standing up. "I want them to think they have won. I want them to come here thinking they are about to strip a senile old man of his dignity. And when they are comfortable, when they are arrogant, that is when I will strike." I walked to the mirror in the corner of my office. I looked at myself. I stood tall. My shoulders were back. My eyes were sharp. I needed to change that. I slumped my shoulders forward. I let my jaw go slack. I widened my eyes to give them a vacant, watery look. I practiced a tremor in my right hand. Sullivan watched me, his mouth slightly open. "You are terrifying, Douglas," he whispered. "I am adapting," I replied, dropping the act for a second. "Now, Sullivan, get the recording equipment ready in the library. Hidden cameras, microphones. I want every word recorded. I want the jury to see their faces when they try to force me to sign." I picked up my phone. It was time to give the performance of a lifetime. I dialed Brandon's number. I waited. 1 ring, 2 rings. They were probably debating whether to answer. They were probably wondering if I was calling to threaten them again. The line clicked open. "What do you want?" "Dad?" Brandon asked. His voice was guarded, but I could hear the hesitation. He had seen the money hit his account. $10,000. It was a lot of money to ignore. "Brandon," I said. My voice was not the voice of the CEO of King Tech. It was weak. It was trembling. It sounded like gravel grinding against glass. "Brandon, I am so confused. Son, I do not know what is happening to me." There was silence on the other end. Then I heard a muffled whisper. It was Vanessa. "Put it on speaker," she hissed. I closed my eyes and leaned into the role. I was sitting here in the dark. "Brandon." I continued, letting a sob catch in my throat, and I started thinking about the party, and I cannot remember it clearly. Everything is foggy. Did I really give Gerald that wine? Brandon's voice came back softer this time. "Yes, Dad, you did. You handed it to him. We all saw it. I must be sick. Brandon," I cried, "I must be losing my mind. The doctor said my blood pressure medicine might cause hallucinations, but I never thought it would be this bad. I am scared, man. Son, I am all alone in this big house, and I do not know what is real anymore." I paused. I let the silence hang there. I was baiting the hook. I was giving them exactly what they wanted. A confession. A weakness. A reason to believe that the poison was my fault, not theirs. "I saw the bank notification," Brandon said. "You unlocked the accounts." "Yes?" I said quickly. "Yes. Of course, mas. I do not want you to suffer because I am not well. I just want my family. I just want to fix this. Please, Brandon, can you come over? Can you bring Vanessa? I want to apologize. I want to make things right before I get worse." I heard them whispering again. Vanessa was excited. I could tell she was probably already calculating how fast she could get the power of attorney papers signed. "Dad, we have the restraining order," Brandon said. "If we come over, we could get arrested. I will tell the security to let you in." I promised, my voice pleading. "I will tell them it is a medical emergency. I need you. Brandon, I cannot find my checkbook. I cannot find the deeds to the house. I want to give them to you for safekeeping, but my hands are shaking so bad I cannot even hold a pen." That was the magic phrase. Deeds to the house. "We will be there in 20 minutes. Dad," Brandon said, "just stay calm. Do not call anyone else. Do not call Sullivan. We will handle everything." I hung up the phone. I stood up and straightened my tie. The tremor in my hand vanished. The confusion in my eyes was replaced by cold, hard steel. "They are coming," I said to Sullivan. Sullivan nodded grimly. "The cameras are rolling." "Douglas." "Good," I said. I walked out of the office and headed for the elevator. My driver was waiting to take me back to the Hamptons. The drive felt shorter than usual. My mind was focused. I was not thinking about the betrayal. I was not thinking about the pain. I was thinking about the endgame. When I arrived at the estate, the rain had stopped, but the fog had rolled in. It was perfect. The house looked like a Gothic castle looming in the mist. I went into the library. It was a massive room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a large oak desk in the center. This was where I had made my biggest deals, and tonight it would be where I closed the final account. I sat behind the desk. I placed a single lamp on the corner, creating long shadows. I scattered some papers on the floor to make it look like I had been frantically searching for something. I left the safe door slightly ajar. Then I sat down and waited. I checked the hidden camera in the bookshelf. A tiny red light blinked once, then vanished. It was recording. 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of a car engine in the driveway. It was the Range Rover. They had wasted no time. I heard the front door open. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Dad, Brandon called out. I did not answer. I slumped forward in my chair, resting my head in my hands. I started to shake. They walked into the library. Vanessa was first. She was wearing a trench coat and her eyes were scanning the room like a hawk. She saw the open safe. She saw the papers on the floor. A smile curled at the corner of her lips. Brandon followed her. He looked nervous. He was looking at me with a mixture of pity and fear. Dad, he said softly. I looked up slowly. I squinted as if the light hurt my eyes. Brandon, I whispered. Is that you? Yes, Dad. It is me, Brandon said, approaching the desk. And Vanessa is here too. I looked at Vanessa. I made my lip quiver. Vanessa, I am so sorry, I stammered. I do not know what happened. I think I am dying. Vanessa walked around the desk. She did not hug me. She did not offer comfort. She placed a hand on my shoulder, but it felt heavy and cold. It is okay, Douglas, she said, her voice smooth and patronizing. We are here to help. We are going to take care of everything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick stack of documents. We just need you to sign a few things, she said, just so we can manage the doctors and the bills while you get better. I looked at the papers: power of attorney, transfer of deed, living will. It was the complete package. She was stripping me bare. I do not have my glasses. I said, feigning helplessness. I cannot read them. You do not need to read them. Dad, Brandon said, stepping forward. It is just standard stuff. Just sign where Vanessa points. I looked at my son. This was his chance. This was the moment he could have saved himself. He could have said, wait, let him read it. He could have said, let us call a doctor first. But he didn't. He pushed a pen into my shaking hand. Just sign it, Dad, he said. It is for the best. I took the pen. I let it hover over the signature line. Vanessa was leaning in close. I could smell her perfume. It smelled like victory. She was practically vibrating with excitement. I cannot, I whispered. My hand, it will not work here. Let me help you, Vanessa said. She covered my hand with hers. She gripped my fingers tight, forcing the pen down onto the paper. She was literally forcing me to sign. I looked up at her. Vanessa? I asked, my voice suddenly dropping the tremor, my voice suddenly becoming the deep commanding baritone of Douglas King. Do you know what the penalty is for coerced signature fraud in the state of New York? Vanessa froze, her hand stopped moving. She looked down at me. I looked up at her. My eyes were clear. My face was stone. I smiled. What did you say? She whispered, pulling her hand back as if she had touched a hot stove. I stood up. I did not stand up like an old man. I stood up fast and powerful. I towered over her. I said thus, you are under arrest, Vanessa. And then the library doors burst open. The library was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. It was a sound that used to comfort me. But tonight it sounded like a countdown. I sat behind my desk, the heavy oak barrier that had separated me from my competitors for decades. Tonight, it separated me from my executioners. I adjusted the lamp, angling the light away from my face. I needed the shadows. I needed them to see what they wanted to see, not what was actually there. I heard the heavy front door creak open downstairs, then the sharp click of heels on the marble floor. Vanessa? She walked with the entitlement of a woman who already believed she owned the place. Behind her, the heavier thud of Brandon's footsteps, and then a third sound, the soft rubber squeak of wheels rolling over the hardwood. They had brought him. They had actually dragged a dying man out of his hospital bed into the damp night just to use him as a prop in their theater of cruelty. I slumped forward in my leather chair. I let my mouth hang slightly open. I relaxed the muscles in my face until I felt the skin sag. I began to tap my fingers on the desk, a nervous, erratic rhythm that signaled anxiety and decay. The library doors swung open. There they were, the wolves. Vanessa entered first. She was wearing a beige trench coat that was belted tightly at the waist. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She did not look like a woman who had spent the last 24 hours at her father's deathbed. She looked like she was arriving for a board meeting. Behind her, Brandon pushed the wheelchair. I looked at Gerald. The sight of him nearly made me break character. He was slumped to one side, his head lolling against his shoulder. His skin was the color of old ash. His eyes were open, but they were glassy, darting around the room with frantic terror. He was paralyzed, trapped inside his own body, unable to scream, unable to warn them that they were walking into a lion's den. "Dad," Brandon said softly, pushing the wheelchair into the center of the room. I looked up slowly. I squinted my eyes as if the dim light hurt them. I stared at Brandon for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Thomas," I whispered. "Is that you?" "Thomas?" Brandon froze. He looked at Vanessa, his eyes wide with alarm. "Dad, it is Brandon," he said, stepping closer. "Thomas was your brother. He died 10 years ago." I blinked rapidly, finding confusion. I looked down at my hands, which I kept shaking violently. "Brandon. Yes, of course. Brandon. I am sorry. My mind it is like a fog. I thought Thomas was coming to help me with the accounts." I saw a small smile tug at the corner of Vanessa's lips. It was a predatory smile. My mistake had confirmed her theory. The drug or the stress or simply old age had finally broken me. She exchanged a look with Brandon. A look that said, "This is going to be easier than we thought." Vanessa walked toward the desk. She moved with deliberate slowness, like one would approach a frightened animal. "Hello, Douglas," she said, her voice dripping with fake honey. "We brought Dad. You wanted to see him, didn't you? You wanted to apologize." I looked at Gerald. I let my lower lip tremble. "Gerald," I stammered, pushing myself up from the chair, only to fall back down as if my legs were too weak to hold me. "Gerald, I am so sorry. The wine. I did not know I would never hurt you." Gerald's eyes locked onto mine. There was a desperate pleading in them. He knew. He knew I was acting. He had seen me switch the glasses. He knew I was the one who did it. But he could not say a word. He could only make a low gurgling sound in his throat. "Shh. It is okay. Daddy," Vanessa said, patting Gerald on the head as if he were a dog. "Douglas is confused, but we are going to fix everything." She turned her attention back to me. She placed her leather handbag on my desk, right on top of the red file I had hidden earlier. She leaned forward, resting her hands on the wood, invading my space. "Douglas, we are worried about you," she said. "You are not well. You are confusing Brandon with his dead uncle. You are shaking. You cannot stay here alone. I do not want to go to a home." I whimpered, clutching the edge of the desk. "Please do not put me in a home." "No one is putting you in a home," Brandon said quickly. He sounded guilty. "At least he had that much decency left. We just want to help you manage things until you feel better." Vanessa shot Brandon a sharp look, silencing him. She took over the negotiation. "Douglas, we need to secure your assets," she said. "If you are having memory lapses, you could make a mistake. You could lose everything. The bank called us. They said you were unlocking accounts, transferring money randomly. That is dangerous." I nodded enthusiastically, my head bobbing like a marionette. I know, I know. I tried to send money to someone, but I forgot who. I am so scared. Vanessa, I worked so hard for this money, but I do not want to lose it. You won't lose it, she promised, unlocking her bag. Not if you let us protect it. She pulled out a thick stack of documents. The paper made a heavy thud on the desk. I stared at the documents. I knew exactly what they were. I could see the words durable power of attorney and irrevocable trust transfer typed in bold letters at the top. What? What is this? I asked, reaching out with a trembling hand. It is just some paperwork to authorize Brandon to pay the bills. Vanessa lied smoothly. And to make sure the doctors take care of Gerald. You want to help Gerald, don't you? Yes, I whispered. Yes, I must help Gerald. Then we need you to sign these tonight. She pushed the papers toward me. She also pulled out a pen. It was a Mont Blanc. My Mont Blanc. The one I had given Brandon when he graduated college. She had taken it from him. She was using my own gift to sign my death warrant. I looked at Brandon. He was standing behind the wheelchair, gripping the handles so tight his knuckles were white. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the floor. Brandon, I said, my voice cracking, are you sure this is right? He looked up. I saw the conflict in his eyes. For a second, I thought he might stop it. I thought he might say, Dad, put the pen down. But then he looked at Vanessa. She raised an eyebrow, a silent command. It is right. Dad, Brandon said, his voice hollow. Just sign it. I let out a shaky breath. I took the pen. I held it awkwardly, letting it slip through my fingers once before gripping it. Vanessa was practically vibrating. She leaned in closer, her eyes glued to the signature line. She was so close I could see the pulse beating in her neck. She was tasting the $50 million. She was already mentally redecorating this library. I lowered the pen to the paper. The tip touched the line. Wait, I said suddenly, pulling the pen back. Vanessa flinched. What? What is it? Douglas? I need water. I rasped. My throat. It is so dry. I cannot focus. Vanessa let out an impatient sigh. She signaled to Brandon. Get him some water. Brandon. Hurry up. Brandon rushed to the wet bar in the corner of the room. I watched him go. Time. I watched Vanessa tap her nails on the desk. Tick, tick, tick. She looked at Gerald. Don't worry. Daddy, she whispered to him, not caring that I could hear. Once he signs this, we can get you a real doctor. Or maybe we will just make you comfortable. You have done your part. I felt a surge of cold rage in my chest. She just admitted it. She was going to let him die the moment the ink was dry. Brandon returned with a glass of water. His hands were shaking almost as much as mine were pretending to. Here, Dad, he said. I took the glass with two hands, making it rattle against my teeth as I drank. I spilled a little on my chin. I wiped it away with my sleeve, acting pathetic, acting broken. Thank you, son, I whispered. I set the glass down. I picked up the pen again. Okay, I said. Show me where. Right here, Vanessa said, pointing a manicured finger at the bottom of the page. And here, an initial here. I leaned forward. I bent my head low over the desk. I am sorry I forgot your name earlier, I mumbled to Brandon while looking at the paper. It is okay, Dad, Brandon said, and I am sorry for what I am about to do. I added, my voice suddenly dropping an octave, becoming steady and strong. What? Brandon asked, confused. I stopped shaking. I dropped the pen. It rolled across the document and fell onto the floor. I sat back in my chair. I folded my hands on the desk. I looked up at Vanessa. The fog in my eyes was gone. The fear was gone. I am sorry that I raised a son who would stand by and watch a vulture pick the bones of his living father. The room went deadly silent. The ticking clock seemed to stop. Vanessa froze. Her finger was still pointing at the signature line. She looked at my face. She looked at my steady hands. She looked at the clear, sharp intelligence in my eyes. And for the first time since she walked into my house, the color drained from her face. "Douglas," she whispered. I leaned forward and the shadows fell away, revealing the wolf that had been waiting in the dark. "Hello, Vanessa. Did you really think I forgot who you were?" I insisted we eat first, before we went into the library to sign the papers. I told them I needed food. I told them my blood sugar was crashing and that my hands were shaking too much to hold a pen. It was a lie, of course. My hands were as steady as rocks beneath the mahogany table. But I needed this meal. I needed one last hour to look into my son's soul and see if there was anything left worth saving. The dining room was a cavern of shadows. I sat at the head of the table, the same spot I had occupied for 30 years. To my right sat Brandon, to my left, Vanessa, and at the far end of the table, like a macabre decoration, they had parked Gerald in his wheelchair. The atmosphere was suffocating. The air conditioning was humming, but the room felt hot with tension. The only sound was the clinking of silverware against fine china. The maid served the soup. It was lobster bisque. It was rich and creamy, and it was Brandon's favorite from when he was a child. I had ordered it specifically. I watched him. He did not even notice. He spooned the soup into his mouth mechanically, his eyes darting to his phone every 30 seconds. Vanessa was not eating at all. She was staring at me. Her fingers were tapping against the stem of her wine glass, creating a sharp, irritating rhythm that echoed in the silence. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded like a bomb counting down. "Douglas," she said, her voice tight with suppressed rage, "we really should get to the paperwork. The lawyers are waiting for my email. It is getting late and Dad needs to get back to bed." I looked at her with my wide, vacant eyes, pretending to be the confused old man they wanted me to be. "Please, Vanessa," I said, my voice trembling. "Let me enjoy this. It is so rare to have the whole family together. Even Gerald is here." I gestured to Gerald. His head was slumped forward. A line of drool was escaping from the corner of his mouth. Vanessa looked at him with pure disgust. She did not offer to wipe his face. She did not adjust his chair to make him more comfortable. She just looked at him like he was a broken appliance she could not wait to throw away. "Brandon," I said, turning to my son, "do you remember this soup?" Brandon looked up, his eyes blank. "What? No. Dad, it is just soup. Your mother used to make this." I continued, letting a note of desperate nostalgia creep into my voice. "On rainy days. Do you remember that trip we took to the cabin? The one where it rained for 3 days straight? You were 10 years old." Brandon shifted in his seat. He looked uncomfortable. He looked at Vanessa, seeking permission to speak. "I remember you caught your first fish that weekend." I went on, ignoring his discomfort. "It was a tiny little perch. You were so proud, but then you saw it gasping for air. You saw it suffering. Do you remember what you did, Brandon?" I waited. I wanted him to remember. I wanted him to remember the boy who cried because he did not want to hurt a living creature. The boy who made me throw the fish back into the lake because he said it deserved to live. I was throwing him a lifeline. I was giving him a chance to connect with his own humanity. Brandon sighed. He pushed his bowl away. The sound of the porcelain scraping against the wood was loud. "I do not know. Dad, that was a long time ago." "You threw it back," I whispered, leaning forward. "You said you did not want to win if it meant something else had to die. You had such a good heart, son, such a kind heart." Vanessa let out a harsh laugh. It sounded like glass breaking. "Oh, God. Douglas, stop it," she snapped. "This is pathetic. Brandon is not a child anymore. He is a grown man who needs to secure his future. He does not care about some stupid fish from 25 years ago. I looked at Brandon, waiting for him to defend the memory, waiting for him to tell her to shut up, waiting for a spark of the boy I raised to flare up and burn through the fog of her manipulation. But Brandon just looked down at the table. He picked up his wine glass and took a large gulp. "She is right, Dad." He mumbled, "We have to focus on reality. The past does not pay the bills." The words hit me harder than the poison would have. The past does not pay the bills. That was it. Then the boy was dead. The kindness was dead. He had sold it all for a lease on a Range Rover and the approval of a woman who despised him. I looked at Gerald again. He was watching us. His eyes were wide and terrified. He was trying to say something. His lips moved slightly. I knew what he was trying to say. He was trying to warn me. Even the man who helped scam me had more conscience left than my own son. Vanessa stood up. She threw her napkin onto the table. It landed in her bowl of untouched soup, slowly soaking up the red liquid like blood. "I am done waiting," she announced. "Douglas, you have eaten, you have told your little stories. Now it is time to sign." She walked around the table and grabbed the handles of Gerald's wheelchair. She spun him around roughly, his head snapping back against the rest. "Come on," she barked at Brandon. "Bring him into the library." Brandon stood up. He did not look at me. "Come on, Dad," he said, his voice flat. "Let us just get this over with." I sat there for a moment longer. I looked at the empty chair where my wife used to sit. I had given him a chance. I had served up his childhood on a silver platter, hoping he would taste the innocence he had lost. But he had rejected it, slowly. I pushed my chair back. I stood up. I let my shoulders slump again. I let the tremor return to my hands. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. I am coming." I followed them out of the dining room. I walked behind my son, who was following his wife like a well-trained dog. They thought they were leading a sheep to the slaughter. They thought I was walking into that library to sign away my life. They did not know that I had already finished my mourning at the dinner table. I had mourned the death of my son. The man walking in front of me was a stranger, and I owe strangers nothing. As we crossed the threshold into the library, the air felt colder. Vanessa was already at the desk laying out the papers. The pen was waiting. The trap was set. But they had forgotten to check who the trap was actually for. "Sit here, Douglas," Vanessa commanded, pointing to my leather chair. I sat. I looked at the papers. I looked at my son one last time. "Are you happy, Brandon?" I asked softly. "Will this make you happy?" Brandon looked at the papers, then at Vanessa. "It is necessary, Dad," he said. "Happiness has nothing to do with it." You are right, I thought. Happiness has nothing to do with what comes next. This is justice. And justice is a dish best served cold, just like the soup you didn't eat. The Mont Blanc pen felt like a lead weight in my hand. It was cold against my skin, just like the air in the room. I held it just above the paper, letting the tip hover over the signature line. My hand was trembling, not because I was weak, but because I was holding back the urge to snap the pen in half and drive it into the desk. I looked at the document. It was a masterpiece of legal theft. Irrevocable power of attorney, transfer of assets, medical proxy. In 3 pages, they had summarized how to erase a man's life. Vanessa was leaning over me. Her shadow fell across the desk, blocking out the light from the lamp. I could hear her breathing. It was fast, shallow. She was like a shark that smells blood in the water. She was so close to the kill, she could taste it. "Sign it, Douglas," she whispered. "Just sign it and you can go to sleep." I lowered the pen. The nib touched the paper. A tiny dot of black ink bled into the white page, but I stopped. I looked up at Brandon. He was standing by the window, looking out at the darkness. He could not even look at me. Tuh. He was a coward, a weak, pathetic coward who would sell his own father for a quiet life. Brandon. I rasped, my voice shaking. What about the employees? What about the company pension fund? I promised them they would be safe. Vanessa let out a sharp hiss of air through her teeth. She slammed her hand down on the desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet library. Forget about the damn employees. Douglas, she snapped. Her voice was no longer sweet. The honey was gone. All that was left was the sting. They are fine. Everyone is fine. Just sign the damn paper. I flinched. I let the pen slip from my fingers. It rolled across the document, leaving a jagged black line before falling onto the carpet. Oh, God, I whimpered, clutching my chest. You are shouting. Why are you shouting? Vanessa, my heart, it is racing. Vanessa stared at the pen on the floor. Her hands curled into fists. Her knuckles were white. The vein in her neck was throbbing. She was losing control. Her patience, which was thin to begin with, had finally snapped. Pick it up, she ordered Brandon. Brandon turned around. He looked tired. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Vanessa, maybe we should wait, he said softly. He is stressed. Look at him. He is shaking. Maybe we can do this in the morning. No, Vanessa screamed. She did not just say it. She screamed it. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly raw greed. We are not waiting until morning. We are doing this now tonight, before he forgets who we are again, before he calls that lawyer, Sullivan, again. Pick up the pen. Randon? Brandon hurried over and picked up the pen. He tried to hand it to me, but his hand was shaking almost as much as mine. Here, Dad, he said. Please, just do it. I looked at my son. I saw the sweat on his forehead. I saw the terror in his eyes. He was not afraid of me. He was afraid of her. He was terrified of the woman he had married. I took the pen. I held it loosely. I am trying. I whispered, but my hand, it will not listen to me. Vanessa let out a guttural growl. She marched around the desk. She grabbed my wrist. Her nails dug into my skin. It hurt. It really hurt. But I did not pull away. I let her hurt me because every bruise she left was another nail in her coffin. You are going to sign this, Douglas, she hissed, leaning her face close to mine. I do not care if I have to guide your hand myself. You are going to sign it. From the corner of the room, there was a sound, a low moan. We all turned. Gerald had slumped forward in his wheelchair. He was trying to lift his head. He was making a sound deep in his throat. It was a sound of protest. He was watching his daughter assault a defenseless old man, and even in his paralyzed state, he knew it was wrong. Vanessa turned on him. She looked at her own father with eyes that were black with hate. Shut up, she yelled at him. Just shut up, you useless old drunk, Dad, Brandon said. Shocked? Vanessa, do not talk to him like that. He is sick. He is not sick. Vanessa spat, pointing a finger at Gerald. He is a burden. That is all he has ever been. A burden. I have spent my whole life cleaning up his messes, paying his gambling debts, lying for him. And now look at him. He is a vegetable. She walked over to the wheelchair. She grabbed the handles and shook it violently. Gerald's head snapped back and forth. His eyes were wide with terror. You had one job, she screamed at her father. One job. Sit there and look like a victim. But you could not even do that right. Could you? You had to drink the wine too fast. You had to ruin the timeline. You are worthless. I sat there watching. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was pounding with rage. I was recording this. Every word, every threat, every act of abuse. She was destroying herself and she did not even know it. She turned back to me. Her chest was heaving. Her hair was messy. The mask of the sophisticated socialite was gone. Standing there in my library was a monster. I looked at her. I made my eyes wide and watery. "Vanessa," I whispered, "you are scaring me. You are scaring Gerald." "I do not care," she shrieked. "I am done being nice. I am done playing the beautiful daughter-in-law. I want what is mine. Douglas, I want this house. I want the money. And I want you out of my life." She grabbed the back of my neck. She forced my head down toward the desk. She jammed the pen into my hand and squeezed her fingers over mine, crushing them against the barrel. "Sign," she commanded. I resisted just a little, just enough to make her push harder. I, I cannot see." I cried. "It is blurry. Sign it or I swear to God. I will put you in the worst nursing home I can find." She whispered in my ear. "A place where they smell like urine and tie you to the bed. A place where no one will ever visit you. Do you hear me? Douglas, sign the paper." I felt the tip of the pen digging into the paper. She was pushing so hard she was about to tear the document. Brandon stood there frozen. He was watching his wife physically assault his father and he did nothing. He just watched. That was the final straw. That was the moment I knew there was no redemption for him. He was not a victim. He was an accomplice. I stopped resisting. I let my hand go limp under hers. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. Vanessa, you win." She let out a breath. She relaxed her grip slightly, but she did not let go. She kept her hand over mine, guiding me to the line. "That is it," she said, her voice dropping to a sinister coo. "Just your name, Douglas King. That is all I need." I felt the pen move, the first curve of the D. The room was so quiet. I could hear the scratching of the nib against the paper. I could hear the ticking of the clock. Tick, tick, tick. I looked at the signature. It was shaky. It was messy. It looked exactly like the signature of a terrified, senile old man. "Good." Vanessa breathed. "Keep going." I finished the first name, Douglas. I lifted the pen. I hesitated before the last name. Vanessa squeezed my hand again. Her nails cut into my skin. "Finish it," she hissed. I looked at the paper. I looked at the word King. King. It was my name. It was my legacy. It was the name on the building on town. It was the name on the checks that paid for her clothes, her car, her life, and she wanted to steal it. I took a deep breath. I felt the change happen inside me. The tremor in my hand stopped. The weakness in my spine vanished. The fog in my brain cleared instantly. I gripped the pen, not with her help, but on my own. I gripped it so hard the metal bit into my palm. Vanessa felt the change. She felt the resistance. She tried to push my hand, but it would not move. It was like pushing against a stone wall. She looked down. She saw my hand holding the pen steady, rock steady. She looked up at my face and she saw it. She saw the eyes of the man who had built an empire from nothing. The eyes of the man who had fired 1,000 people. The eyes of the man who had buried his wife and raised a son alone. She saw Douglas King, and Douglas King was not smiling. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Why did you stop?" I slowly pulled my hand away from hers. She was too shocked to stop me. I sat back in my chair. I twirled the pen in my fingers. A smooth, confident motion. I looked at the signature on the paper. Douglas. It is incomplete. I said. My voice was no longer a rasp. It was deep. It was resonant. It filled the room. Vanessa took a step back. She looked confused. She looked terrified. What? She stammered. I said it is incomplete. I repeated, looking her dead in the eye. You forgot the date. Vanessa. And you forgot the witness. Witness? She asked, her voice trembling. Bon is the witness. No, I said, standing up. I stood up to my full height. I buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. I looked at Brandon, who was staring at me with his mouth open. I looked at Gerald, who had stopped moaning and was watching me with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. And then I looked at the bookshelf, specifically at the third shelf from the top. No, I said again. Brandon is not the witness. I pointed at the bookshelf. They are. You asked who the witnesses were. Vanessa, you asked why I needed a hidden camera in my own library. You thought you were walking into a nursing home, but you walked into a courtroom and I am the judge, the jury, and the executioner. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black remote control. I did not look at the buttons. I did not need to. I knew exactly which button would end your life as you know it. I pointed the remote at the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. The screen was dark, a black mirror reflecting the terrified faces of my son and his wife. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. The image was grainy at first, black and white night vision, but the audio was crystal clear. It was footage from a hospital room, specifically the private room where Gerald had been lying in a coma just 24 hours ago. Vanessa gasped. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. She recognized the room. She recognized the coat she was wearing in the video. In the video. The Vanessa on the screen was leaning over the hospital bed. She was not crying. She was not holding Gerald's hand. She was slapping his cheek lightly, not to wake him up, but to mock him. Wake up, old man, the digital Vanessa hissed. Her voice filled the silent library amplified by the surround sound speakers. It was shrill and cruel. You really messed this up. Gerald. You were supposed to sip it, not chug it like a desperate alcoholic. Now look at you. You are practically brain dead. In the library, the real Vanessa began to shake. Turn it off, she screamed, lunging toward the desk. Turn it off, Douglas. That is private. That is illegal. I did not move. I did not have to. Brandon stepped in her way. Move, Brandon, she yelled, pushing his chest. No, Brandon said. His voice was quiet but firm. He was staring at the screen, mesmerized by the monster wearing his wife's face. I want to see this. On the screen, Vanessa continued her monologue to the unconscious man. But maybe this is better, she said, smoothing Gerald's hair back. If you die, I get the sympathy vote, the grieving daughter, and Douglas gets the murder charge. It is almost poetic. Then she leaned in close to Gerald's ear, and what she said next made the air in the library turn to ice. Do not worry, baby. I will miss you. I will miss the way you look at me. I will miss our nights in the city. But let us be honest. You were getting too old for me anyway. Brandon froze. He turned his head slowly to look at the real Vanessa. Baby, he whispered. Why did you call your father baby? Vanessa's face was white, ghost white. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. On the screen, the confession continued. I should have left you in Vegas, Vanessa said to the man in the bed. When I found you at that blackjack table, you were broke and owing money to the mob. I paid your debts. I bought you new teeth. I bought you those suits. I created Gerald Vance, the loving father. The digital Vanessa laughed. It was a cold, dark sound. We had a good run, didn't we? Who would have thought a washed-up gambler and his 25-year-old girlfriend could fool a billionaire family? We played the long con, Gerald, and we almost won. But I cannot share the 50 million with a vegetable. So do me a favor. Just let go, die, and let me be rich and single. The video cut to black. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a world ending. I placed the remote control gently on the desk. I looked at my son. Brandon was standing perfectly still. He looked like he had been hit by a truck. His eyes were wide, unblinking, staring at the black screen. He was trying to process the words he had just heard. Girlfriend Vegas Con. He turned slowly to look at the man in the wheelchair. He looked at Gerald, the man he had called Dad for 5 years, the man he had invited to Thanksgiving dinners, the man he had bought gifts for. And then he looked at Vanessa, the woman he slept next to every night. He is not your father, Brandon whispered. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Vanessa was shaking her head frantically. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they were tears of terror, not sorrow. Brandon, listen to me, she stammered, reaching out for him. It is not what it sounds like. I was upset. I was talking crazy. The stress made me say things I did not mean. Do not touch me, Brandon roared. He flinched away from her hand as if it were covered in acid. He backed away until he hit the bookshelf. He looked sick. He looked like he was going to vomit. You slept with him, Brandon said, his voice rising to a scream. You slept with him and you brought him into my house. You introduced him as your father. He looked at me. His eyes were wild. Dad, did you know? I looked at my son with pity. This was the hardest part, breaking his heart to save his life. I suspected son, I said softly. The private investigator found the marriage license in Nevada. It was annulled 3 months later. But the trail was there. Gerald is not her father. He is her ex-husband and her current lover. Brandon made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. He slid down the bookshelf until he was sitting on the floor. He put his head in his hands. Oh my God, he moaned, rocking back and forth. Oh my God, I paid for his heart surgery. I paid for his apartment. I called him Dad. Vanessa saw that she was losing him. She saw the $50 million slipping away. The panic took over. She turned on me, her eyes blazing with hatred. You ruined everything, she screamed. You spiteful old man. You think this changes anything? You still sign the papers? I have your signature. I have the power of attorney. The video means nothing. It is inadmissible. I will say it was a deep fake. I will say you doctored it. She grabbed the papers from the desk, clutching them to her chest like a shield. I am leaving, she announced, backing toward the door. I am taking these to my lawyer. You can rot in this house. Douglas and Brandon, if you want to stay with this lunatic, go ahead. But I am taking the money. She thought she still had a card to play. She thought the signature on that paper was her golden ticket. I watched her back away. I watched her reach for the door handle. She had forgotten one thing. I picked up the pen from the desk. I held it up. Vanessa. I called out. She stopped. She turned around her hand on the doorknob. What she spat. I told you the signature was incomplete. I said calmly. I told you that you forgot the witness. I do not need a witness, she sneered. I have the paper. I pointed to the wheelchair. I pointed to the man she had just admitted to leaving for dead. The man she had mocked. The man she had betrayed. Gerald's head was no longer slumped. His eyes were no longer glassy. He was sitting up straight and he was looking at her. And the look in his eyes was not fear. It was pure, unadulterated fury. I think your father has something to say. I said, Vanessa looked at the wheelchair and laughed. It was a high-pitched, nervous sound that grated against the silence of the library. "He is brain dead, Douglas," she scoffed, waving her hand dismissively at Gerald. "He cannot witness anything. He does not even know his own name. He is a vegetable because of you." She turned back to the door, clutching the papers to her chest. "Nice try, old man, but I am leaving, and tomorrow my lawyers will." She stopped. Behind her, there was a sound. It was the sound of leather creaking, the sound of weight shifting. Vanessa turned around slowly. Her eyes widened. Gerald was gripping the armrests of the wheelchair. His knuckles were white. His arms were shaking, but he was pushing himself up. "Sit down, Daddy," Vanessa hissed, taking a step toward him. "Sit down right now." Gerald did not sit down. He pushed harder. His legs, which she claimed were useless, found purchase on the rug. He stood up. He swayed slightly, but he stood tall. He looked at Vanessa. The fear in his eyes was gone. It was replaced by a cold, burning hatred. "I am not your daddy," Gerald said. His voice was raspy from the intubation, but it was clear, and it was loud. Vanessa dropped the papers. They scattered across the floor like dead leaves. You can talk," she stammered. "I can talk," Gerald said, taking a step toward her. "And I can remember. I remember the hospital room. Vanessa, I remember you standing over my bed. I remember you telling the doctor not to resuscitate me if my heart stopped." He looked at Brandon, who was cowering against the bookshelf. "She tried to kill me." "Kid," Gerald said, pointing a shaking finger at Vanessa. She knew the dose she put in that wine was too high. She knew Douglas might survive it because he is big, but she knew it would stop my heart. She used me as a guinea pig. "Liar." Vanessa screamed. She looked frantic. She looked like a trapped animal. "He is lying. Brandon, the drugs messed up his brain. He is hallucinating." "I am not hallucinating," Gerald shouted. He reached into his jacket pocket. "I have the phone. Vanessa, the burner phone you gave me. The one with the text messages where you told me exactly when to fake the seizure. The one where you promised me 20% of the inheritance if I helped you frame Douglas." He pulled out a cheap flip phone and threw it onto the desk next to me. "It is all there." "Douglas," Gerald said, looking at me, "the whole plan. She planned this for 6 months. She wanted you institutionalized and me dead." Vanessa looked at the phone, then at me, then at Brandon. She saw the walls closing in. She saw the $50 million evaporating. She saw prison bars. And then she snapped. She let out a feral scream. She did not run for the door. She ran for Gerald. "You traitor." She shrieked, lunging at him. She was fast. She reached into her purse and pulled out a letter opener she had swiped from the desk earlier. She raised it, aiming for Gerald's chest. I did not move. I did not have to. Before she could reach him, the library shadows came alive. Sullivan stepped out from behind the heavy velvet curtains. Two large men in dark suits stepped out from the hallway. My personal security team. One of them caught Vanessa's wrist in midair. He twisted it effortlessly. She cried out, dropping the letter opener. The other guard grabbed her by the waist and pinned her arms behind her back. "Get off me!" she screamed, kicking and thrashing. "Get off me! Brandon, help me! They are hurting me." She looked at her husband. Her eyes were pleading. "Brandon, do something. Tell them to stop." Brandon pushed himself off the bookshelf. He walked slowly toward her. He looked at the woman he had loved. He looked at the face that had lied to him every single day of their marriage. He stopped in front of her. He looked down at the scattered papers on the floor, the papers that would have signed my life away. He looked up at her. "You called him baby," Brandon whispered. Vanessa stopped struggling. She looked at him, desperate to manipulate him one last time. Brandon, please, it was just a nickname. I was confused. I love you. Brandon reached out. For a second, I thought he was going to touch her cheek, but he reached past her. He grabbed her left hand, the hand with the 3-carat diamond ring I had paid for. He pulled the ring off her finger. It was tight, but he didn't care. He yanked it off, leaving a red mark on her skin. Ow! Vanessa yelped. What are you doing? I am getting a refund, Brandon said. He turned his back on her. He walked over to me. He placed the ring on my desk next to the burner phone in the toxicology report. I am sorry, Dad, he said. His voice was broken. I am so sorry. I looked at my son. He was crying, but for the first time in years, they were honest tears. I looked at Sullivan. Call the police, I said, and tell them to bring a transport van. We have 2 guests who will be checking out permanently. No, Gerald yelled. Wait, Douglas? I helped you. I gave you the evidence. You said if I testified, you would help me. I looked at Gerald, the man who had tried to scam me, the man who had slept with my daughter-in-law. I picked up the burner phone. I said I would help you stay alive. Gerald, I said coldly. And I did. I just saved you from her. I nodded to the second guard. Cuff him, too. But I am the victim. Gerald protested as the guard slammed him against the wall. No. Gerald, I said, leaning back in my chair, you are just the accomplice who got caught. And in my house, nobody gets a free ride, not even the witness. The room was filled with the heavy breathing of the security guards and the soft whimpering of the woman who had once ruled this house with an iron fist. Vanessa was pinned against the bookshelf, her arms twisted behind her back, but her eyes were still darting around the room, looking for an escape that did not exist. I picked up the red file from my desk, the file I had kept hidden in the safe, the file that contained the autopsy of a marriage that was dead before it even began. I walked over to Brandon. He was standing by the window, staring at his reflection in the dark glass. He looked like a ghost. He looked like a man who had woken up in a burning house only to realize he was the one who lit the match. Read it, Brandon, I said, holding out the file. He shook his head slowly. I do not want to know. He whispered, You need to know. I said, my voice hard. You need to know exactly who you brought into our lives. You need to know that her name is not Vanessa. It is Sarah. And she is not from a wealthy family in Connecticut like she told you. She is from a trailer park in Florida, and she has 3 outstanding warrants for identity theft and fraud. Vanessa let out a screech. Shut up, Douglas. Do not listen to him. Brandon, he is making it up. I ignored her. I opened the file and pulled out a photograph. It was a mugshot. It was 5 years old, but the eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, empty. She did not meet you by accident at that charity gala. Brandon, I continued forcing him to look at the photo. She targeted you. She spent 3 months researching us. She knew where you shopped. She knew where you got your coffee. She knew exactly what kind of woman you wanted. I looked at Vanessa, who had stopped struggling and was now glaring at me with pure venom. She knew you were desperate for approval. I said, she knew you felt overshadowed by me. She knew you were the weak link in the King Empire, and she played you like a cheap violin. Brandon took the photo. His hands were shaking so bad he almost dropped it. He looked at the mugshot. Then he looked at the woman being held by my guards. Is it true? Brandon asked, his voice barely audible. Did you target me? Was any of it real? The vacations, the late-night talks, the vows? Was any of it real? Vanessa stopped fighting. She straightened her spine. She realized the game was truly over. There was no more money to be had, no more mansion, no more acting. She looked at Brandon, and for the first time she showed him her true face. It was a look of absolute boredom. Real? She scoffed. Brandon, look at yourself. You are a man-child living on your daddy's allowance. You have no spine. You have no ambition. Do you really think a woman like me would fall in love with a mart like you? The cruelty of her words hung in the air like smoke. I needed a mark. She spat. And you were the easiest mark I have ever seen. All I had to do was tell you that you were smart, that you were special, that your father did not appreciate you, and you handed me the keys to the kingdom. It was pathetic. Really. Brandon recoiled as if she had slapped him. The physical slap at the hospital was nothing compared to this. This was a soul killer. She was stripping away every happy memory, every moment of intimacy, and revealing it to be nothing more than a transaction. You monster, Brandon whispered. Vanessa laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. I am the monster, she said. You are the one who was willing to let your father be lobotomized just so you could buy a bigger boat. Do not pretend you have the moral high ground here. Brandon, we deserve each other. That was the breaking point. Brandon let out a cry of rage. He lunged toward her, but I grabbed his arm. I held him back. No, I said firmly. She wants you to hit her. She wants to be the victim again. Do not give her the satisfaction. I pulled my son back. He collapsed against me, sobbing into my shoulder like he did when he was 5 years old and scraped his knee. But this wound would not heal with a bandage. I looked at the guards. Get her out of here, I commanded. And take him too. I pointed to Gerald, who was still cowering against the wall. The guards began to drag them toward the door. Vanessa did not go quietly. She started screaming, cursing, swearing vengeance on our entire bloodline. I will write a book, she shrieked as they dragged her into the hallway. I will tell the world who you really are. Douglas King, you will never be free of me. I listened to her screams fade away as the front door slammed shut. Then there was silence. The library felt empty. The papers were still scattered on the floor. The pen was still on the desk. The evidence of the crime was everywhere. But the real crime was standing next to me. Brandon pulled away from me. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. I nearly killed you, he whispered. I sat here and I watched her force you to sign. I knew something was wrong. I knew she was hurting you and I did nothing. He looked at me with eyes full of shame. I chose a devil over my own father. I looked at my son. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him it was going to be okay. But I could not lie to him. Not anymore. You did, Brandon. I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. You betrayed me. You betrayed yourself. And that is something you are going to have to live with for the rest of your life. I walked over to the desk and picked up the ring he had pulled off Vanessa's finger. I held it up to the light. It was fake. Just like her. Just like their marriage. Just like his loyalty. Go upstairs, Brandon, I said. Pack your things. He looked at me confused. Pack my things, he asked. Where am I going? I do not know, I said, placing the ring back on the desk. But you cannot stay here. Not tonight. I need to clean this house. I need to fumigate it. And right now, everything in it reminds me of the betrayal. Dad, please, Brandon begged. I have nowhere to go. She took everything. The accounts are frozen. You have your freedom, I said, turning my back on him. And that is more than you deserve. I heard him leave. I heard his heavy footsteps walking away. I heard the front door open and close one last time. I was alone. I sat down in my leather chair. I picked up the toxicology report. I looked at the chemical formula for the poison that was meant to steal my mind. I had won. I had saved my fortune. I had exposed the predators. But as I sat there in the silence of my empty victory, I realized that Vanessa was right about one thing. She had taken something from me that I could never get back. She had taken my son. The boy I raised was gone. And the man who walked out that door was a stranger I no longer recognized. I reached for the phone to call Sullivan. It was time to rewrite the will. It was time to start over because, in the end, the only person you can truly trust is the one looking back at you in the mirror. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers cut through the darkness of the driveway, illuminating the library in chaotic bursts of color. The silence of my estate was shattered by the crackle of police radios and the heavy boots of officers swarming the hallway. Sullivan had made the call efficiently, and within minutes, the private security guards were handing over their prisoners to the authorities. I stood by the fireplace, watching the scene unfold with the detached calmness of a man watching a storm on a television screen. Vanessa was no longer the poised socialite. She was a wild animal caught in a trap. Her expensive trench coat was torn at the shoulder from her struggle. Her hair was a bird's nest of tangles. As the officer tightened the handcuffs around her wrists, she let out a scream that was not human. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated rage. "You will pay for this, Douglas!" she shrieked as they marched her toward the door. "You think you have won, but you have not. I will sue you from my jail cell. I will tell them you planted the drugs. I will tell them you forced me." I did not say a word. I just watched. I watched as the officer read her rights. "You have the right to remain silent." It was ironic because silence was the one thing Vanessa was incapable of. She kept screaming, cursing my name, cursing Brandon, cursing the father she had tried to murder. Behind her, Gerald was being wheeled out. He was not screaming. He was weeping. He looked small and pathetic in the handcuffs, his head hanging low. He looked at me one last time as they pushed him past the library threshold. "I am sorry, Douglas," he mumbled. "I really am." I looked away. Sorry does not fix a shattered family. Sorry does not undo the poison. When the front door finally slammed shut, taking the noise and the chaos with it, a heavy silence descended on the library. The air felt thinner, lighter. I turned my attention to the only person left in the room. Brandon was kneeling on the rug. He had collapsed there when the police arrived, and he had not moved since. He was staring at the spot on the floor where Vanessa had stood. His hands were resting on his knees, and his shoulders were shaking. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. The library, which had been the site of my greatest business triumphs and my happiest family memories, now felt like a mausoleum, and my son was the chief mourner at his own funeral. "Dad," Brandon whispered. His voice was cracked and dry. I walked over to the desk and began to gather the papers. The unsigned power of attorney, the transfer deeds, the toxicology report. I aligned them into a neat stack. I needed order. I needed to clean up the mess. "Dad, please look at me," Brandon begged. I stopped. I placed my hands on the desk and leaned forward. I looked at him. I looked at the top of his head where his hair was thinning, just like mine used to. I looked at the expensive Italian shoes I had bought him for his birthday. I looked at the son I had raised to be a prince who had chosen to become a jester. "Get up, Brandon," I said. My voice was devoid of anger. It was devoid of warmth. It was just a fact. Brandon looked up. His face was wet with tears. His eyes were red and swollen. "I did not know she was going to kill him. Dad," he sobbed. "I swear to God. I thought she just wanted the money. I thought she just wanted to secure our future. I never wanted anyone to die." "You thought she just wanted to steal $50 million from your father?" I asked calmly. "And you were okay with that? You were okay with theft? You were okay with fraud? You were okay with declaring me mentally incompetent so you could buy a bigger house?" Brandon flinched as if I had struck him. "She manipulated me." He cried. "She twisted everything. She told me you hated me. She told me you were going to cut me off. I was scared. Dad, I was scared of losing her. You should have been scared of losing yourself." I replied. Brandon shuffled forward on his knees. He reached out to grab my hand, but I took a step back. I put the heavy oak desk between us, a barrier that could not be crossed. I can change. Dad, Brandon pleaded. I will testify against her. I will tell the police everything. We can start over. I will work at the company. I will start at the bottom. I will do anything. Just please do not turn your back on me. You are all I have left. I looked at him and I felt a pang of pity. But pity is dangerous. Pity is what made me hide Vanessa's past 5 years ago. Pity is what made me keep filling his bank account. Pity had almost killed me. I picked up the phone on my desk. I dialed a number. Sullivan, I said when he answered. Is the car ready? Yes, Douglas Sullivan replied. It is waiting outside. Good. And Sullivan called the locksmith and the real estate agent. I want this house listed by morning. Dad. Brandon gasped, standing up. What are you doing? You are selling the house. I hung up the phone. I looked at Brandon. I am not selling it. I said, I am donating it. Donating it. Brandon repeated, his mouth hanging open. Yes, I said. I am donating the estate to the state of New York. It will be converted into a rehabilitation center for victims of elder abuse. I think it is fitting. Do not you? But where will I live? Brandon stammered. I do not know. I said, and for the first time in 35 years, it is not my problem to solve. I picked up the stack of papers and the Mont Blanc pen. I walked around the desk. I walked toward the door. Dad, you cannot do this. Brandon cried, running to block my path. This is my home. You cannot just kick me out. I am your son. I stopped. I looked him in the eye. I saw the fear. I saw the entitlement. I saw the boy who never grew up because I never let him. You are my biology. Brandon, I said, but you are not my son. My son would have stopped her. My son would have protected me. My son died the moment you watched her force that pen into my hand and said nothing. I stepped around him. He reached for my sleeve, but his hand dropped before he made contact. He knew. He knew it was over. You have 1 hour to pack your things, I said without looking back. The security team will escort you off the premises. If you are not gone by then, they will remove you for trespassing. Trespassing, Brandon whispered. In my own house. It is not your house. I said, walking into the hallway. It never was. It was my house. You were just a guest who overstayed his welcome. I walked out the front door into the cool night air. The rain had stopped completely. The fog was lifting. The moon was breaking through the clouds, illuminating the long driveway. My town car was waiting. Sullivan opened the back door for me. Where to? Douglas? He asked. Take me to the city. Sullivan? I said, sliding into the leather seat. I have a meeting with the board of directors of the Children's Hope Foundation first thing in the morning. The foundation? Sullivan asked, closing the door and getting into the front seat. Yes, I said as the car pulled away. I am transferring the $50 million to them. I want to create a scholarship fund for orphans, children who have no one but still manage to make something of themselves. I looked out the window. I saw the silhouette of my mansion disappearing in the distance. I saw the light in the library window where Brandon was likely frantically packing his bags, realizing that for the first time in his life, he was truly alone. I felt a weight lift off my chest. I had lost a son, but I had regained my dignity. I had lost a family, but I had found my freedom. The car sped up, heading toward the lights of New York City. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. It tasted like a new beginning. I am Douglas King. I started with nothing and I ended with nothing but the truth. And that is enough. Before I go, let me leave you with this thought. We spend our whole lives being told that blood is thicker than water, that family comes first no matter what, that you have to forgive them because they are your kin. But that is a lie. Family is not about whose DNA you share. It is not about a last name. And it is certainly not about who sits at your dinner table on Thanksgiving. Family is loyalty. Family is the people who stand by you when you are weak, not the ones who try to bury you. Family is the people who respect you enough to tell you the truth, not the ones who smile to your face while pouring poison in your glass. If you have people in your life who drain you, who manipulate you, who make you feel small, cut them off. It does not matter if they are your children, your parents, or your siblings. You do not owe anyone your sanity. You do not owe anyone your life. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and close the door on the people who share your blood, but not your heart. I am Douglas King, and I am finally free. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between family and your own survival? Until next time, remember the only empire worth building is one based on truth. Stay safe and watch your drink. We are raised to believe that family is a sacred bond that can never be broken. But the story of Douglas King teaches us a painful yet necessary truth. Blood is biology, but loyalty is a choice. When we tolerate disrespect and betrayal simply because it comes from a relative, we are not being noble. We are being self-destructive. True family are the people who protect you when you are vulnerable, not the ones who sharpen their knives. Never set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm, especially if they are the ones holding the match. Your dignity is worth more than their approval. If this story made you rethink the meaning of family, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of cold, hard justice. And tell me in the comments below, if you were Douglas, would you have left your son penniless or given him a second chance? I read every single comment. See you in the next story. 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 The next story.